Hi everyone. In today's video, we'll continue with the high-low method part 2. Compared to the first video, here we'll be considering a slightly different scenario where we'll consider stepped fixed cost. Stepped fixed cost means where your fixed cost increases after a certain activity level. For example, if you're renting a warehouse, the warehouse would have a limited capacity, say 250 units, which means when you produce anything up to 250 units, you'll pay a fixed amount of rent for the warehouse. But if you were to produce even 1 unit more than 250, you'll need to rent another warehouse. That means your fixed cost will now increase. So this is a stepped fixed cost. In the real world scenario, you very often have stepped fixed costs, and hence the high-low method needs to be used in a slightly different manner so that you can still determine your variable cost per unit, and hence you can calculate your fixed cost. So we'll continue with the example that we used for part 1, and we'll slightly extend the example to include the stepped fixed costs. So in yesterday's example, we had 3 activity levels, which were 50, 125 and 250, and we had the total cost at 6,000, 7,500 and 10,000. For these 3 activity levels, the fixed cost remains the same. Now what we have added a condition here, or 2 different conditions, is the fixed cost increases by an absolute amount, that is $3,000, if you exceed 250 units. Or a different type of example where your fixed cost increases by 60% once you cross 250 units. So we'll see how we can tweak the high-low method in order to calculate the value of B in both the cases, where you have an absolute amount, that is $3,000, or where you simply have a percentage, that is 60%. Now coming back to the example, when we do produce 500 units, we are having a total cost of $18,000, and when we produce 800 units, we have a total cost of $24,000. Right now, we'll stick to the first scenario where your cost increases, or your fixed cost increases by an absolute amount, that is $3,000. You have 2 ways to use the high-low method over here in order to calculate B. The first method is you consider only those activity levels where the change in the fixed cost has not happened. For example, you can either consider these first 3 activity levels, that is 50, 125 and 250, or you can consider 500 and 800. The reason being, in the first 3 activity levels, there is no additional $3,000, whereas in the other 2 activity levels, that is 500 and 800, you have the additional $3,000. So in this case, make sure whatever activity levels you're considering, they are consistent. So for example, if we go with 800 and 500, we'll simply say 24,000 minus 18,000 divided by 800 minus 500. What you get over here is 6,000 divided by 300, and the value that you get over here is $20, and this is your variable cost per unit. If you want to go with the earlier 3 activity levels, it will be what we had solved yesterday, that is 10,000 minus 6,000 divided by 250 minus 50. Here you get 4,000 divided by 200. You'll still get the same answer, that is 20. So the only difference between the 2 is that you have divided the activity levels into where the fixed cost remained the same, and after the activity level where the fixed cost increased. So that is why in 500 and 800 both had the additional $3,000, and hence in the first method we used 24,000 and 18,000 at an activity level of 800 and 500. Or you can use activity levels of 250 and 50 and have the cost of 10,000 and 6,000. The other method of solving this is, if you don't want to split the activity levels, you can still use the same formula, but your formula will change slightly. In this case, we will not split it, but what we'll do is We'll consider the cost at the highest activity level, that is 24,000, minus the cost at the lowest activity level, that is 50. We'll consider 6,000. But now remember, we are considering two activity levels here where the fixed cost isn't the same. In this case, 24,000 has an additional fixed cost of 3,000, whereas the 6,000 doesn't have that cost. So we'll simply, what we do is we get rid of the additional fixed cost. And hence, the formula has slightly changed now. Now we have your cost at highest activity level minus cost at lowest activity level minus the additional fixed cost. Rest of the formula remains the same. 800, that is the highest activity level, 800, and your lowest activity level, that is 50. So what you have over here is 15,000 divided by 750. And you still get the same answer, that is $20. So you have both the methods of solving your variable cost per unit, that is the value of B. Either you can split the activity levels such that the total cost has the same amount of fixed cost, or you can actually consider the highest activity level cost and the lowest activity level cost and just get rid of the additional fixed cost that exists, and then you'll get the same. Now, in this one, it was possible to do this because we knew the absolute amount of the additional fixed cost, which was $3,000. But what if you're given the scenario where you're only told that the fixed cost increases by 60% and you don't know what is the absolute amount? In such a case, it is better to stick to the first method that we discussed over here, because this ensures that whatever activity levels you're considering, the total cost of those activity levels, either both the costs will have that additional fixed cost or they will not have that fixed cost. And in that case, you don't need to worry about getting rid of the additional fixed cost, and you can simply get your value of B. So remember, when you are presented with a scenario where you have an additional absolute amount of fixed cost, you can use either of the two methods. Let's call them A and let's call this A, let's call this B, and let's call this C. So in this case, you're comfortable, you can choose whichever method you want to use, A, B, or C, that's fine. But when you have a scenario where you are given only a percentage increase in the fixed cost, then it's best to go with either option A or option B only. You cannot use option C if you have a percentage increase or decrease in fixed costs. Hope this video was useful and everything is clear. If you still have any questions, please feel free to email me or leave the comments in the comment section, and I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. Thank you.